All right, can you see?
Yes, it is full screen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, so the idea. So first, let me thank all the organizers, Patrizia, Rita, and also Francesco for inviting me. I think it's nice to have these small workshops, and I took this small workshop actually as an opportunity to look for interesting ideas. So I'm not going to discuss about my work today. I'm going to discuss about a topic which I think could be very interesting. I'm still not totally okay. And say sure that it can be actually useful, effective in information geometry, and in particular in application to possibly machine learning and so. But it's certainly, I think, beautiful, as Paolo was suggesting as a first talk. I mean, I think the topic, the information geometry, is very nice because it allows to work at the boundaries of different of different domains in mathematics, physics, and information theory, and this is an example of that. Okay, so the main topic is Lie group thermodynamics, and seeing this Lie group thermodynamics that I will explain to you as a sort of information geometry and Lie algebra. On one way, this is kind of trivial. If you think of it in classical terms, you will see. And I think the most interesting fact about this, the most interesting implication of this kind of topic would be on the quantum side. But I will not discuss about the quantum case. Okay, and also I will not discuss about applications, in fact, because I think I mean, first because I didn't find many, honestly, and the one I found were basically theoretical. So, I mean, I would like to raise these questions also for the audience. If you know where these sort of arguments would be can be applied in a fruitful way. Okay. Okay. So let me start. So the main idea is to basically to use this generalization of standard thermodynamics in geometric terms. So this is the thermodynamics was defined by Suryo in the 70s, basically as a symplectic generalization of standard thermodynamics. Okay, and in this case, basically you pass from Gibbs states, which are defined with respect to the action of a translation in time, so an energy in some time, an equilibrium with respect to this action, to something which is associated to the action of a more complete object, or if you want, a generic Lie group acting on the phase space of your dynamical system. So it's actually focusing on a geometric mechanics setting, but it's much more general. So in this case, basically you have a Gibbs state which becomes something labeled by Lie algebraic parameters, Lie algebra. And given that you have a thermodynamic metric, which is a Fisher metric, we will show you what I mean by that, then you get effectively an information geometric setting which is fully characterized by Lie algebra. Okay, so this is kind of straightforward in a sense, but it's very nice. Now, the goal, or what is people is claiming somehow, is that you can exploit these Lie group tools, so representation theory, orbits, methods, and so and so, to in information geometry, so to enrich basically the geometry that typically is used in information geometry, and also possibly to Lie group machine learning. This is a kind of neologism. I don't know if it's an English word, but in the sense that basically you can you want to extend basically what is Fisher metric to Lie group to homogeneous symplectic manifolds on so cojoint orbits. You want to apply this group theoretic approach when you have data sets which are basically Lie group manifolds. So imagine something which is defined on sphere in meteorology, okay, or something which is associated to the moving of a frame, which can be like a SE2 in space when you have like a military application and so. And in general, my idea is that, okay, nice, you can use groups, so symmetry, in order to reduce the complexity of the parameter space, for example, in machine learning. What the drawback may be, I guess, and I mean, it's an open discussion, so please interrupt me from the beginning, is that this too much symmetry is very rigid. And we see that most of the new results in, for example, in machine learning are based on something which is very far from equilibrium, very far from Gibbs, and very far from what I'm gonna tell you, basically. So reality is kind of non-symmetric or slightly symmetric, or if you want, and in this sense, it's nice to also to try to apply, local symmetries and new tools from symmetry, which are not standard, to this kind of mind frame. Okay, so what is the equilibrium thermodynamics? I was supposed to start to discuss to an open audience abroad and also to students. So I wanted to start with something familiar, which is standard equilibrium thermodynamics. But I wanted to give it a standard thermodynamic approach in a bit more information to write it, in the sense that, okay, you consider a physical system typically when you do thermodynamics. This is a small system which is in equilibrium with something which is a large, typically thermal reservoir. And when you want to describe the probability at equilibrium of this state, you use a Gibbs ensemble, which everybody knows, right? So the probability of a configuration X for given parameters lambda of the system is given by this exponential e to the minus beta inverse temperature to the H, which is the Hamiltonian typically, and Z is the partition function. So basically a normalization constant. Okay, now this is a standard approach related to Hamiltonian flows in time and energy. But in fact, from this formula here already, you can see that H is something which can split and typically splits into a collection of collective variables, what I call Xi, okay? And conjugate generalized forces, lambda I. So beta H, in fact, is something like a scalar product between two conjugate quantities. And this is very general, okay? One is lambda, one is X. Lambda is not a temperature. So this is also a bit different from what you will see in the group thermodynamics, but I think it's more correct. Is something related to an intensive variable. So if you can think of X as a time independent function of the configuration, what in information geometry would be like the sufficient statistics, I guess. Whereas the conjugate variables are time dependent and configuration independent variables, okay, which typically include the inverse temperature factor. So an example is, for instance, the isothermal isobaric ensemble that everybody knows. When you have that these X, so the macroscopic observables, okay, are internal energy U and volume V, and lambda, the intensity parameters, the forces in thermodynamics are beta, the conjugate inverse temperature to the energy, and P, the pressure, okay, not the beta, and which comes with a beta in front, which is associated to the volume, okay? So it's external pressure. Okay, now, so if you start by unfolding this Hamiltonian already at this level, then you see that okay, you can forget about thermodynamics of engines and cars and look at a more epistemic viewpoint, so information theoretic content of these. So what you're doing with thermodynamics, you are giving a reduced description of dynamics of the system in terms of a flow through mean values of a small set of if you want, privileged observables, which are the X I was discussing before. So these observables can be, what are easier to find, to describe from a relational point of view. And in this sense, basically they, okay, those are random variables, okay, because they come from a coarse-grained picture. Defined over, now I'm using a sample space, so the configuration space. And you can think of thermalization just as basically the choice of representing our probability, so a likelihood for these for the variables in the configuration in terms of an exponential family. So in terms of this probability law. Okay, this probability law is very special in the case of Gibbs because it's is the one that maximizes the entropy associated to that probability. Okay, so there is a way in which you can see, I mean, the coming of Gibbs in terms of generic random variables and as an outcome of a maximum entropy, so a variational problem principle. Okay, so the manifold of thermodynamic states is a statistical manifold. In fact, as we were, here I was relying, and I was lucky on what was said before by Luigi and Paolo. So is a statistical manifolds because it's parameterized basically by this lambda, by these intensive parameters, thermodynamics. And these intensive parameters lambda are the canonical coordinates, okay, of our manifolds. Okay. So when you have so here I'm kind of switching from thermodynamics to information theory, but in fact I want to stay with thermodynamics in a sense because I want to show you that all you see is something it's really familiar. Okay.
Sorry, Goffredo, may I ask a question?
Yes.
So your manifold of states lives in a convex cone, if I understand this correctly.
Yeah, this convex is basically the span, of the set of these xi.
Yes. So your manifold lives there, the statistical manifold.
Yeah. So this is.
Thank you. Okay.
It will be clear later. I didn't
Okay.
use it. Okay. So basically, to show you how close, how basically coincident with the standard information geometry we are, you can look at the fact that given a partition function, basically you have given all the thermodynamic potentials, free energy, free entropy, or Messier potential, also said, entropy, and basically given this object psi, which is the Messier potential, which is a generating function for information geometry, you can get, the mean values, which are the conjugate coordinates in information geometry that you call momenta, okay, or mixture coordinates, and you can get covariant metrics, which is nothing but the variance of your expected value of your observable, which is basically, in the case of a regularity, nothing but the Fisher information. So this is also called a thermodynamic metric tensor, and is used in thermodynamics in order to study distances among non-equilibrium states, for instance. Okay. So, okay, what I want to say then is that, so before going to Lie group thermodynamics, already thermodynamics and information geometry are very close one to each other once you take this information theoretic approach to thermodynamics. Okay, but you can, so what Suryo or these people and in Lie group thermodynamics is telling you is that you can be more general than that, in fact. And you can think that what relevant observables are not just what you choose, maybe by chance or by convenience, but are actually associated to a symmetry of the system. Okay, so typically, what will survive out of a very chaotic dynamics of a large dimensional system is something which is related to the symmetry of the system. Okay, and this is very clear in geometric mechanics. Once you have like an Hamiltonian or let's say a mechanical system, you do all your reduction, okay, via standard Weinstein, or say to be so you consider the reduction of the system down to the physical phase space, or the fully reduced phase space. This is a space of solutions, and this space of solutions is fully characterized basically by the symmetries of the system. So the symmetry of the system at this level may tell you what are the quantities which have to play the role of observables, okay, in a randomatic sense. And in fact, this is the case. And in fact, you can see by a geometric mechanic approach, that these quantities, so which are at the end of the day are the conserved quantities, can be encoded into an object which is called momentum map here. So, but okay, and basically all what we have done with in thermodynamics with a moment map, which is the Hamiltonian, can be more generally done with the generic moment map associated to the action of a generic Lie group. Okay. So, okay. Do you have questions so far? Or comments? No. Okay, so I can continue.
Sorry, I don't understand who is M in the, in this interpretation.
Yeah, so now I'm going from if you want thermodynamics to geometric mechanics in terms of language, and our configuration space before was a generic omega, if you want big omega typically. Now is a symplectic manifold, okay, and I call my symplectic manifold M with a symplectic form 2 form omega, okay. So everything we do here is basically done on a configuration space which is a symplectic manifold, okay, generic symplectic manifold. If you come from geometric mechanics, you have to think of that as the fully constrained phase space. If you come from mathematics, you can just think of it as a symplectic manifold. So not a cotangent space, more general symplectic manifold. Okay, so I want to consider like the action phi now to be an Hamiltonian action of a generic Lie group G on a connected symplectic manifold, okay? And I call J, okay, defined from M to the dual of the algebra associated with the group G, the moment map of this action, of this group action. And the moment map is basically for each y, so an element of the algebra, so this Hamiltonian vector field xy on M, it's an Hamiltonian function, so a more general notion of Hamiltonian, which is given by the contraction of this momentum map with an element of the algebra, okay, via dual pairing. And this momentum map is defined basically by this equation. Can you see my mouse moving?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Also this. So, so exactly as I was saying. So this co-momentum map, as it's called, is basically a scalar quantity which provides a vector valued generalization of the Hamiltonian function. Okay. So imagine that you are considering, I don't know, the G be the Galilei group. This Galilei group doesn't have only one Casimir, doesn't only have like energy, or it has a rotation, translations. So each of these, each generator of the group in general will have some conserved quantity associated to it. And the momentum map is basically the vector of conserved quantities, okay? So in this sense, is a generalization of your Hamiltonian function. So for each element in the algebra, then you can consider, this integral. Now, the integral over an exponential of minus, in this case, a priori is an arbitrary sign, the co-momentum map integrated over your symplectic manifold, where mu now is a little bit measured, okay? And you can see that basically you can define the y's such that this object, this integral, which will be eventually the partition function, is normally convergent, okay? So then you stated that the set of elements of the algebra associated to the action of the group G, for which this integral is normally convergent, is called a generalized set of temperatures, okay? So basically we are doing what it was done in the derivation of Gibbs within this generalization, group theoretic generalization. So now we denote this subset of G omega, big omega, not to be confused with the previous sample space, okay? Okay, so when this omega is non-empty, which is the most basically the most fundamental point to prove in any practical application, because in many cases this is empty. Okay, the partition function associated to this Hamiltonian action phi is written in the standard way. Okay.
I'm sorry, Goffredo, I missed with omega.
Now omega, sorry, which was exactly your question before. Now omega is the set of elements of the algebra of the group G, okay, for which what I will call the partition function is normally convergent. So it's well defined, okay, and will allow me to define a state which is normalized. So a priori, this can be an empty set.
Well, for Kähler quotients, for homogeneous Kähler quotient, this was answered by Guillemin and Sternberg, and tells you exactly what is this thing, right?
Say it again, sorry.
So the answer to your question, whether an integral is convergent, this was answered by Guillemin and Sternberg for for Kähler quotients of Lie reductive Lie groups. If you take this symplectic manifolds, they give an answer to this.
In the sense that you can already say whether or not this set is empty, or
yeah, no, you can show it's not empty. It is.
Well, in some cases it is. So it depends.
No, I'm telling you Kähler quotients. Quotients
okay.
that there is a Kähler structure of groups. That it will be. So the answer is that you have Lie algebra. You can identify with the dual this thing, the image of the moment map. So and then it will be in the positive Weyl chamber of these lambdas, right? I mean,
okay. So this may be a more sophisticated way to
look at it.
I will tell you later on.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Because I'm very interested, very interested, Goffredo. So go ahead, and then I will. Okay.
So okay, then okay, we go ahead. So we define this. Assume that this set is not empty. Then we have a partition function, and we can define a given state, which is now associated to the action of the group on your symplectic manifold M. Okay. Now this object is invariant, not generally. So this object is invariant only with respect to the action of a one parameter subgroup of the group under consideration. Okay. And the reason is that, of course, the orbits of the subgroup action are integral because of the Hamiltonian. So the momentum map is a first integral along these orbits, but it's not for the action of the full group, and then we will see how it is not. So it is a generalization in a sense, but it's not a full generalization, or if you want, it leads to something which is not exactly a deep state, or not exactly an equilibrium state. Okay, but still, I mean, at this level, we can see exactly the analogy with what I was introducing in a familiar framework of classical thermodynamics. Here, basically, if you read out what we had before, now the betas, which are again, I want to think of them as not as temperatures, but more as intensive parameters. Okay, in fact, they are conjugate to J's. Here you have you frame these in algebraic terms. One is in the dual algebra. J is an object in the dual algebra, and beta now are object in the algebra. So they are conjugated. And betas, so the algebra, the subset omega, basically is the set of parameters which define the statistical manifold. Okay, in this sense, basically, you are algebraically characterizing Gibbs, and this gives you basically a statistical manifold, which is nothing but the algebra, the subset, specific subset of non-null, elements of the algebra, which allows you to build the Gibbs. Okay, so this is really beautiful, I would say. I mean, what can we do with that? That's an open question to me. Okay, so first of all, we want to find a Fisher metric. Okay, so to find a Fisher metric, we need to define what our thermodynamic function. Here I'm going parallel with the standard case. So you can define a mean value as the mean of the momentum map. Okay. And of course, each of these points can be expanded into information geometry, and who goes into information geometry knows what these objects are in terms of coordinates and so on. So you can define an entropy in this, and at equilibrium. So for the set of betas, okay, which define my statistical manifold, you see that both mean values and entropy are defined in terms of derivatives of differentials with respect to beta of the log z, which is.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Goffredo. So according to what Paolo said in his talk, here Fisher metric is unique. You expect one Fisher metric, no?
Yes.
Because the setting is not quantum.
Yeah, that's right. Still, I mean, yeah, here is certainly unique. In fact, it is unique and it's interesting to see it because here we are at the border, you know, between classical and quantum, because this is it's very close to be a Hilbert space. In the quantum case, this basically goes. This algebraic approach goes into naturally into the space, and I think what we will find here is the equivalent of the KB, how does it come? Not the no. Well, the quantum Fisher, basically, the standard, the canonical one. Kubomori. Kubomori. Okay, so let me continue. So here I just want to say that all this thermodynamical potential can be defined in terms of differential of the logarithm of the partition function, which is the cumulant in standard classical in statistics, and in fact, well, you have you can expand these in thermodynamic terms, but it's not what is interesting here. So you can find the Clausius relation. But as I was saying, we are interested in the Fisher, and this appears again as in standard way as a second differential of this Massieu potential, which is the logarithm of the partition function, or if you want, the cumulant of your distribution. Okay, so how it comes? So you have that the second differential in the betas is this bilinear symmetric form. Okay, and then you can see that this is an Hessian again of your log z function, and this is nothing but a variance actually of the score, if you want, or a variance of the expected value of the co-momentum map. But it's also in the case of effective action of the group, which means nothing but regularity in a sense. So for all cases, for any vector in the algebra such that this quantity, the momentum map, is not constant along the orbits. So when basically your Massieu potential is regular, you recover a standard Hessian geometric setting for the exponential family of information geometry, in the sense that this bilinear form is definitely positive. So is a Riemannian metric and is nothing but the Fisher metric. Okay. Now is a Fisher metric on the set, on the algebra, on the subset of the algebra, omega. Okay. When I was saying that we recall everything from the standard Hessian, basically geometry of the exponential family, in particular the submodel given by Gibbs, is that once you have regularity, then you see what is the characteristic function, what I call Massieu potential or cumulant, if you want. How from the expression of the entropy, you can see how the two quantities, Massieu and entropy, are conjugate via Legendre transform. And you can also show that the mean value is basically the bijective map, is a diffeomorphism between the subset, between the omega set algebra to the open subsets of the dual. Okay, so this is what made me pass from one description in information geometry, which is the one of the the mixture and exponential, so-called description. Okay, but there is something more. So far so good. We are reproducing exactly the information that we have in information geometry for a standard Gibbs state or Gibbs family, or with the only peculiarity that we are on a subset of an algebra. Okay. In fact, this is something I'm trying to understand better. But what comes with some news is that the difference, as I was saying before, between thermodynamic equilibrium in the standard case and in this case is that the Gibbs is not invariant with respect to the action of the group. So here we introduce the notion of equivariance, basically, which is also very, very important and goes in the direction of relaxing a bit symmetry especially machine learning, as far as I understand. So basically, your momentum map, which plays the role of energy, is not invariant under the action of the group. It's an equivariant object with respect to the action of G and an affine action of the group on the dual of the Lie algebra. Okay, so basically is what you have. So when you act on the domain of the momentum map with the group, you get equivariance. So not with respect to the coadjoint action, as you would do standard, but with respect to this affine action. And this affine action basically is nothing but the coadjoint action where you had what is called a symplectic cocycle of the group. So you get this extra geometric term, which is called symplectic cocycle. And this is something which you don't see, okay, if you only restrict to the action of a one-dimensional subgroup of the one-dimensional action. So okay, so basically this theta, this cocycle in general characterizes non-equivariance, and if your energy, okay, basically change when you act with a group, then everything else changes basically. So also the partition function get a factor, the geometric factor. The Gibbs state itself, the distribution basically change, and but still the variation of the thermodynamic potential is very well how can I say it? Is very well it's very nice in the sense that, okay, the mean value change according to the momentum map, so in an equivariant way. The Fisher matrix is invariant, okay, so in this sense there is no ambiguity on what the Fisher matrix is. There is only one Fisher matrix once you define your set of beta for which characterize the Gibbs. And the entropy also is basically invariant under the affine action. So on one side, you can say that the invariance by reparametrization information geometry here is replaced by this notion of covariance, of equivalence. On the other side, you have here it's very technical, so I will not enter on these on how many minutes?
Alfredo, you have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, perfect. Okay. So on the other hand, you have that you start building quantities in terms of objects which are purely induced by a group. Let me say so. So here I was showing that thermodynamics potentials, once you have a non-equivariance with respect to the coadjoint action, they get extra terms. Okay. But in fact, these extra terms, which was a cocycle, and in this case, I'm introducing also symplectic one cocycle of the Lie group, while theta, big theta, don't want to be technical. So yeah, what I want to say is that basically you can at the end of the day, you can express your Fisher matrix, okay, with respect to these quantities, which are 1 cocycles of the Lie group in this case. And yeah, in particular, you can see that this metric corresponds to what is called what is a 2 cocycle for the action of the group. So the essence of what I want to say in a very confused way, I'm sorry, is that basically you forget about the properties of your manifold, okay? All the information is given by the group, okay? And so if your statistical manifold was associated to an algebra, which was fine, now you see that also the quantity which basically characterize this manifold, like the Fisher information, are fully defined, characterized by geometric quantities associated to the action of the group, like the 2 cocycle of the group, okay? Which I think it's very beautiful again. This allows you, for example, to look for the 2 cocycle of the group in a specific setting and get the information, the Fisher information. Okay, so focus on. I understand that this is very naive if you don't have a practical application under, but I still don't have it. So, but this is the message. So thermodynamic function and relation depends on the Lie group and the associated cocycle, and they don't depend on the manifold, on the configuration space, which is actually also what is known from thermodynamics in a sense. Okay, we lose contact with the configuration space. Another interesting thing is that, for example, you recognize that the entropy is a constant under the action of the group, the adjoint action, and also under the affine coadjoint orbits. And this provides extra structure to your statistical manifold description. So, for instance, you can see that the statistical manifold foliates. Okay, once you find a conserved quantity, it foliates in orbits, which are the affine coadjoint orbits. And on these affine coadjoint orbits, you can basically induce a new symplectic structure, okay, by a generalization of the standard Kirillov constant-Souriau symplectic form, which is typically done for adjoint orbits, for coadjoint orbits. No? So basically, this is extra structure that you earn, which allows you to foliate, for example, your statistical manifold in a nice way. And in particular, given you have some, now each of these is all these of these leaves is a Poisson manifold, okay. And you have Poisson bracket. In this case, you can also define dynamics on these. Okay, you can define dynamics, and you can see that leaves where your entropy is conserved and dynamics inside its leaves is associated to equilibrium dynamics. Okay, and while jumping from one leaf to another is associated to a dissipation phenomenon. Okay, so you can use, for example, contact geometry, I guess, also in this setting, and bring in all these tools when you study symplectic manifolds. When you study statistical manifolds. Okay, so this is all I have about application. So I will not show you. Basically, once you have the structure, then you give me a group, and then I calculate all these quantities, and then I put them together to give you the Fisher metric and whatever you want. Okay, so first of all, I have to see if this group is a good group in the sense that it allows a set of beta temperature which is non-empty. And secondly, I can define what I was showing you. So this is a paper by Varescu, which is pushing a lot on this stuff. And for example, it was using these techniques in order to study, the motion of an object flying. Basically, the motion point by point, in time is given by a representation of a group, which is SC3 in 3-dimensional SC2. And so you can really do what I showed you in details with the proper representations. So I close. So this was, as I was saying, like a topic to basically to investigate. There was no result, and I think it's very interesting, and we have to understand how to actually apply this stuff, and also to generalize it, as I was saying, in terms of contact geometry, for instance. So we have that these Lie groups thermodynamics, okay, provides basically statistical mechanics yeah, in the framework of homogeneous symplectic manifolds. You can recover all what you had in information geometry. So the Fisher metric is defining a Riemannian metric. You have the standard Hessian characterization of your exponential family geometry. You can basically see who is the generating function, and so this Fisher metric can be applied to design natural gradients now, as Luigi was showing in details now on homogeneous manifold, which is an interesting thing. And potential application in machine learning are related to the group theoretic characterization of this approach, in the sense that if you have the lack of having either an input which lives on some manifold, which is properly characterized by the group, or if you somehow have an internal space, which has of parameters, which is characterized by group symmetry, then possibly these techniques are relevant. And also you can use these techniques, basically applying the full set of information that you have in geometric mechanics in order to study dynamics in statistical manifolds, okay, which is something we do already in many different ways. But I think there is a lot of room here to use geometric mechanics in statistical manifolds, which is still not so much explored. Okay, and that's it. So I'm open to criticism and and discussions.
Okay.
Thank you for your attention.
Very much for this interesting talk. Are there questions? We have